Alright guys, so this is like a little warm-up. I like to do something kind of cool and interesting. It's usually science, physics oriented, but it's just something kind of off topic sometimes, and just stuff that you might find interesting. Alright, so this one's about dimensions, and this does have to do with physics, so here we go. Let me get my pencil out here. There we go. And the dimensions. First off, we're going to imagine a car. Okay, so I could draw a car, but I'm not a very good artist. So here's our car, okay? And it's got a little window here. And they're driving and stuff like that. There's another car. There's another car, okay? And there's my other car. And they're driving along. And let's say this is the x-axis. So this is one dimension, and here's a line, correct? I'll call this the x dimension, right? But we'll call it dimension 1 or x dimension. And car 1, and here's car 2. Car 1 is right here. Okay? So, it could be anywhere on this line, correct? It could be over here, it could be over here. There's a donut shop over here. There's a bank over here, and so on. He's right here. What would happen if this car 2 also ended up right here? Well, they would crash. Remember, this is one line, and they're both in the same spot, so they would crash. You can't be in the same spot. They're going to crash. One could be here and one could be here, right? But they'll crash right here. Actually, they could both be right here in the x position as long as we bring in another dimension, a second one. So let's bring in a second dimension, okay? Let's bring in dimension number 2, which we'll call, so here's the first car right here. And we'll call this one y, or number 2. You can call them anything you want. So here's my second dimension. Car 1 and car 2 are both here, except car 2 is further away in a y dimension right here. Pretty cool, right? So look at that. They're both in the same x position, but they're in different y, so they won't crash. They're totally safe. That's not going to bother them at all. So that's fine, right? Until, what if, and I'm going to erase one of these. There we go. I'm getting a little bit better with this. What if they both decided to go? What if they both happen to be this spot in the x dimension, this spot in the y dimension, and they're both right here? Well, then they're going to crash because they can't both be there. They'll crash unless we introduce a third dimension, and that's the z. So in the z dimension, you got x, you got y, and then what if they're both right here? Well, one could be here, but the other one be out here. That's z. It goes in and out of the board, right? It's kind of hard to show that on a drawing, so that's why I'm bringing this camera here. One could be in the x, they could both be in the same x, right? They could both be in the exact same x and the same y. But as long as they're in different z's, they're safe, correct? Well, what would happen if they're both in the same x, the same y, and the same z? They're both right there. Well, then they're going to crash, correct? That's exactly in the same spot. So then there's nothing you can do to avoid it now, right? False. We can introduce a fourth dimension. What's the fourth dimension? Time. They can both be there, but at different times. One be there at 1 o'clock and one be there at 3 o'clock, right? And they won't crash. So you can be parked in the same parking spot on the same hill and everything, as long as you're in different times and you won't crash. That's the fourth dimension. By the way, scientists think there's up to, sometimes mathematically something like 9 dimensions. They start to get super complex and beyond like our rationale, since you only live in 3 or 4 dimensions. So it's kind of hard to explain dimensions that we don't really see or understand. But anyway, so that's the 4 dimensions. We got the x, the y, the z, and then time. All of this moves through time, a whole nother dimension, as you can see, right? Because 2 cars can park in the exact same spot and not crash. In the same x, same y, same z, in the exact same spot, and they don't crash into each other. Why? Because they'll be in different fourth dimensions. The time, different times. So that's a cool little talk about dimensions. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you again for tomorrow's topic.